Welcome to the Sermon in the Valley with Pastor Rob Eller. You can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast on any of those platforms and share it with your friends and family. Thank you. The views expressed in this episode are solely that of the host and do not reflect the official views of Emmanuel Lutheran Church in New Philadelphia, Ohio, the Northeastern Ohio Synod, or the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Thank you. Welcome back to the Sermon in the Valley. Pastor Rob Eller here with your Thursday commentary episode. So to start off, there's a video circulating around social media recently of a pastor preaching at a church. I know who the pastor is. I'm not going to say their name for just to keep them from being continually harassed. As a note, because of that video circulating around social media, they have faced harassment. Their ministries have faced harassment for what they have said. And I'm not here to perpetuate that harassment. I'm here to clear the air about the context of that video and why there's some problematic parts in that video. So they were preaching on a Sunday, and before they even started their sermon, they made a bit of a note that that they didn't read a certain passage from that was in the bulletin, or that was the sign for the day. And doing some digging, I found that the passage is a chunk of scripture from 1 Corinthians. And it's from the first chapter of 1 Corinthians. And it's the one where Paul is saying that the cross is foolishness to the Gentiles and a stumbling block to the Jews, because the Jews demand signs and the Greeks desire wisdom. And the pastor had said, "No, that we didn't read that out loud because Paul's being a jerk to the Jews and the Gentiles." And they start off by saying, that they didn't read that because it was yikes. Yikes is not a legitimate reason to not read scripture. It's really not. And I'll get more into why we can't treat scripture that way in a little bit. But for some context on what Paul was writing, Paul was writing to the church in Corinth. Corinth being a city in the Eastern Mediterranean in Greece. And so obviously he was writing predominantly to Jews. And so he knew his audience very well. And to say yikes seemed pretty... It's just not... It's not appropriate. And it wasn't taking into point the context. So Paul's writing to the Corinthians. They were Greeks. He was right, and he was also of Jewish heritage. So he wasn't trying to hurt anybody in that writing. He was just saying, no, hey, you as Greeks, you desire wisdom. You desire facts. You desire physical proof. And he, as a Jew, was saying, no, the people I'm from, we want signs. We want miracles, which is exactly what people demanded of Jesus. A lot. So it wasn't a harmful thing for him to say that. And what this pastor was saying is, they were doing the one thing we were taught not to do when it comes to preaching and reading the scriptures and teaching the scriptures. They were doing what's called eisegesis. Eisegesis, according to Wikipedia, is the process of interpreting text in such a way as to introduce one's own presumptions, agendas, or biases. It's commonly referred to as reading into the text. It is often done to prove a pre-held point of concern and to provide confirmation bias corresponding with the pre-held interpretation and any agendas supporting it. What we're supposed to do when reading the Bible is what's called exegesis, which is the opposite. Exegesis, again according to Wikipedia, is drawing out a text's meaning in accordance with the author's context and discoverable meaning. Exegesis tends to be objective, eisegesis highly subjective. So, all that being said, we are taught to look at the text, and there are many different ways we can interpret the text. There is narrative interpretation, seeing scripture as a story. My preferred method, and this just comes from me being a history teacher and a historian, is to look at it through a historical lens. What was happening when this scripture was written? Like, what were the historical events? What was happening? What was the culture? What was the context? When looking at anything that St. Paul wrote, because in the Bible, the epistles or letters by St. Paul are actual physical letters he wrote to churches he helped start around the Mediterranean. So those are actual physical letters. So when we're looking at what Paul wrote, we need to look at the context of the time. What was happening in the region Paul was writing to? What was happening to Paul himself? Yes, Paul can come off as a jerk sometimes in his letters. But that's because a lot of times Paul was trying to tell his churches to, knock it off. I found a funny thing on Facebook recently. It's an image from a conference, and it shows the general Pauline letter outline. And it's these 5 things. Grace, I thank God for you. Hold fast to the gospel. For the love of everything holy, stop being stupid. Timothy says hi. That 4th part, for the love of everything holy, stop being stupid. That was the theme of a lot of Paul's letters. Because he was trying to tell the churches he had helped found, look, knock it off. There are more important things to worry about than what you're fighting about. Or, you just need to have faith. You need to trust this. That's why he was saying in that passage from 1 Corinthians, just have faith in the cross. Have faith in Jesus. Stop demanding signs. Stop demanding proof. Just have faith. And this whole thing, this whole situation, that whole video boils down to the whole thing of we can't cherry pick the scriptures. We can't have our own personal thought and then try to find something to match our viewpoint. Our viewpoints should be informed by scripture. It shouldn't be the other way around. That's the dangerous part. Is where people they cherry pick scripture and find little bits to fit their personal agendas. They use eisegesis, or putting their own agendas into scripture to fit their needs. We don't do that. And yes, the scriptures are difficult to read. I spent 4 years in seminary, and even I still don't understand everything in the Bible. There are troubling passages. There are passages with violence. Physical violence, sexual violence. There is a lot of that in the scriptures. We can't just overlook it. We have to wrestle with it. We have to think about it. We have to wonder, okay, why is this in here? What is the importance that we need to get out of this? There's a whole book in the Old Testament that's basically biblical erotica. The Song of Solomon. We don't read it much in church. We maybe pick a few pieces, but we have to wrestle with that. The book of Revelation is for all intents and purposes a book written by an apostle while he was on a desert island, either high on poppies or going through sensory deprivation in a cave, or a combination of the two. But yet that made it into scriptures, and that's got some really intense text in there. Like, read Revelation from beginning to end, and you'll see that it's just wild imagery, things that you just cannot understand. But we can't just omit it because we don't feel like dealing with it. Now, I'll admit I have omitted scripture before. Probably just a couple months in to my call here. I was a newly minted pastor. A couple months in, I did call an audible and change the gospel reading one day. It was commonly referred to as the divorce text in the Bible, where Jesus condemns divorce. I omitted that because I was brand new to this church. I didn't know the people well enough to know that if there's anybody affected by divorce in my congregation, and I didn't want to go into Jesus condemning divorce. It also happened to fall on World Communion Sunday, and so I was able to pivot to those readings instead, because if that felt a little more appropriate. But I admit that I'm not proud of that. It was just something I did this coming summer, because it'll be 3 years and we'll be back into that cycle again. Okay, yeah, I will probably tackle that text. I spent some time here. I know what I'm doing now. But this pastor in this video is a seasoned pastor. They know what they're doing. And rather than trying to tackle Paul's letter head on, they just said it was yikes and omitted it and basically described it in a way that was wildly inaccurate. We need to wrestle with the scriptures. We need to read it, think about it, and think, okay, does this apply to me today? If so, how should I interpret it? If not, maybe I need to look into a little deeper. Context matters. The context of the whole Bible matters. You can't just cherry pick a verse and hold on to it. One of my pet peeves is when I see the verse out of the New Testament that Paul wrote saying, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." It's often used as a way to say, "Oh, I can do anything. No, God is with me." No, there's deeper meaning to that. Paul wrote that at a hard time in his life, and he was saying, "No, I can do this. I can't give up hope. I can do this." It's not of I can do anything I want because I've God on my side. It's God's giving me strength to get through this hard time, and God will give you strength to get through your hard times as well. That's what Paul is trying to say. The scriptures, the Bible, it's not a tool for us. It's not a tool that we can manipulate to our will. It is a tool. We are certainly to use it. We're to teach it. We're to live by it. But it's not something that we are to just throw out the stuff we don't like. And I know that's pretty ironic coming from a Lutheran pastor, considering Martin Luther omitted a huge chunk, which is now known as the Apocrypha. All those books of the Apocrypha were books that Luther felt weren't supposed to be in the Bible, and I get the irony of me saying we can't throw stuff out of the Bible. But if we don't look at where the author was coming from, if we don't look at the time that it was written, we will never truly appreciate it. We'll never truly know what the scripture has to say for us. So please, read everything. Look into everything. If you don't like what you're reading, don't throw it out. Dig deeper. Find the context. There are biblical scholars out there that you can tap into what they know. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good. I'm not going to say one way or the other, I will say, some of my favorites, are Walter Brueggemann. He is in my opinion, one of the best Old Testament scholars out there. N.T. Wright is one of the best New Testament scholars out there. But dig deeper. Don't just look at it on a surface level. Find out what's below the surface. And then you will see what is really there. Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to this podcast. Share it with your friends and family. We are on multiple platforms. Pretty soon, if you listen to us on Google Podcasts will be going away pretty soon, so we'll be hopefully transitioning to YouTube instead. The Sermon in the Valley is written and produced at the Patrick Stevens Broadcast Studio, here in the heart of the Tuscarawas Valley. God's peace be with each and every single one of you. Have a blessed day.